too perfect to stay. The excitement of our upcoming trip had been building for weeks. 7 of us had planned this getaway, searching endlessly for the perfect accommodation that would fit our tight student budgets. The idea came during our final exam week, when we were all stressed and desperately needed something to look forward to. We spent countless nights huddled around our laptops, scrolling through various booking sites, comparing prices and locations. That is when I found the listing. The price caught my eye first. It seemed almost too good to be true for such a spacious house. The photos showed a well-maintained traditional building nestled deep in the mountains, far from the chaos of city life. The wooden structure had a certain charm that drew us all in, with its wide windows and surrounding forest. The interior shots displayed clean, cozy rooms with vintage furniture that gave it a homey feel. The booking process was unusually simple. No credit card required, just a straightforward bank transfer. The confirmation message arrived within minutes, stating everything would be ready for our arrival. No complicated check-in procedures, no need to coordinate meeting times. The owner mentioned they would prepare everything in advance, allowing us to treat the place like our own home. Looking back, I should have questioned why someone would trust complete strangers with their property so easily. We planned meticulously for the trip, dividing responsibilities among ourselves. Some handled the food shopping, others planned activities, and I took charge of navigation. The morning of our departure, we loaded up 2 cars with enough supplies to last us several days: portable speakers, board games, ingredients for barbecue, and probably more alcohol than we needed. As we drove through winding mountain roads, our anticipation grew with each mile. The deeper we ventured into the wilderness, the more our phone signals fluctuated, but none of us cared. We were too busy singing along to our road trip playlist, sharing snacks, and planning our activities. The journey took us through small villages that gradually became more sparse, until we were surrounded by nothing but dense forest. The drive took longer than expected, and the sun was already high in the sky when we finally spotted the turnoff to our accommodation. The gravel driveway crunched under our tires as we approached what would be our home for the next few days. The house stood before us, exactly as pictured: a 2-story wooden structure with a wraparound porch and large windows that reflected the afternoon sun. At that moment, we all felt lucky to have found such a perfect spot for our getaway. The isolation that would later terrify us only added to the charm then. We unloaded our cars with the enthusiasm of children at summer camp, racing to claim the best rooms and explore every corner of our temporary home. Looking back now, I wish we had turned around at that moment, when we still had the chance. But how could we have known? How could anyone have predicted what awaited us in that house? The first thing that struck me upon entering was the peculiar stillness of the air. Despite its apparent age, the house showed no signs of neglect: no cobwebs in corners, no dust on surfaces. Everything seemed meticulously maintained, though clearly from another era. The wooden floors creaked beneath our feet as we explored, their polished surface reflecting the afternoon light that streamed through the windows. We divided the rooms quickly, our voices echoing through the empty halls. The house was surprisingly spacious, with 4 bedrooms upstairs and a large living area downstairs. The kitchen, though equipped with older appliances, had everything we needed. The previous owners had left basic supplies: dishes, cutlery, pots and pans, all clean and ready for use. While unpacking, I noticed the first oddity, though at the time it seemed insignificant. A portrait hung in the main hallway, an oil painting of a woman in dated clothing. Her expression caught my attention immediately. Tears streamed down her face, her eyes filled with such profound sadness that I found myself staring longer than I intended. Something about her gaze made me uncomfortable, as if her sorrow might somehow be contagious. I remember thinking it was an unusual choice for decoration, especially in a vacation rental. "This place is incredible," my friend called from the kitchen, breaking my focus on the portrait. "Look at all this space for cooking." The excitement in her voice drew me away from the painting, and I joined the others as they continued exploring. The bathroom fixtures were old but functional, with a large clawfoot tub that we all admired. The water ran clear and strong, another pleasant surprise for such a remote location. Even the water heater worked perfectly, which we tested immediately after our long drive. Outside, a spacious deck wrapped around the house, offering views of the surrounding forest. The previous owners had left outdoor furniture, sturdy wooden chairs, and a large table perfect for our planned barbecue. The railing showed signs of recent repair, and the boards had been sealed against weather damage. As we settled in, we kept discovering small details that added to our initial impression of luck. The beds were made with clean, fresh-smelling linens. The windows all opened smoothly, letting in the mountain air. Even the old television in the living room worked, though it only caught a few channels through its antenna. "I cannot believe we got this place for such a low price," one of my friends remarked as we gathered in the living room after unpacking. "It is like something out of a magazine." We all agreed, marveling at our good fortune. The isolation that had initially concerned some of us now seemed like a bonus. No neighbors to complain about noise, no traffic sounds to disturb our peace. Just the whisper of wind through trees and occasional bird calls. I remember checking my phone then, pleased to find I still had decent signal. I snapped a few photos of the interior to send to my parents, wanting to share our amazing find. The others did the same, posting pictures on their social media accounts. Everything appeared normal in those first photos, the vintage furniture gleaming in the sunlight, the polished floors, the neat kitchen waiting for our use. None of us noticed then how the house seemed to absorb sound in unusual ways, or how the shadows in corners appeared slightly darker than they should. We were too excited about our vacation, too busy planning the evening ahead. If we had paid more attention, perhaps we would have noticed the subtle wrongness that permeated the place. But at that moment, we were just 7 friends ready to begin what we thought would be a perfect getaway. The afternoon unfolded exactly as we had hoped. We started with a swim in the nearby stream we had spotted during our drive up. The water was crystal clear and refreshingly cold, a perfect remedy for the summer heat. We splashed around like children, our laughter echoing through the trees. I remember taking photos of everyone jumping into the deeper pools, their bodies suspended midair against the backdrop of dense forest. After swimming, we gathered on the deck for our barbecue. The old grill we found in the storage shed worked surprisingly well. The smell of marinated meat filled the air as we cooked, mixing with the smoke from the charcoal. Someone connected their phone to our portable speaker, and music drifted through the mountain air. We took turns grilling, drinking beer, and sharing stories. I pulled out my phone several times during the afternoon to capture moments. My friends gathered around the grill, plates piled high with food, all of us laughing at inside jokes. The photos looked perfect on my screen, everyone smiling, the food looking delicious. I posted a few on my social media, adding captions about our perfect getaway. The signal was strong enough that the uploads went through quickly. As the sun began to set, we moved inside. The temperature dropped noticeably, and we switched on the old lamps, casting a warm glow throughout the living room. Someone found a deck of cards in a drawer, and we started a drinking game. The alcohol flowed freely, and our voices grew louder with each round. I stepped away briefly to text my girlfriend, sending her photos of our day and telling her how much fun we were having. She responded quickly, asking about the house and commenting on how nice everything looked. Our conversation felt normal, just like any other day. I even called her briefly, the connection clear despite our remote location. The evening continued with more games and stories. We raided our snack supplies, spreading chips and candy across the coffee table. The old TV hummed quietly in the background, playing some local news channel we could barely make out through the static. Looking back now, I try to remember if there were any signs during those happy hours, any hint of what was to come. Did the shadows in the corners grow darker than they should have? Did the laughter sound hollow in strange ways? Were our reflections in the windows slightly off? But all I can recall is the warmth of friendship and alcohol, the satisfaction of good food, and the feeling that we had found the perfect spot for our vacation. As night fully settled in, our group naturally began to wind down. The combination of swimming, sun, food, and drinks had left us pleasantly exhausted. That is when the first divide occurred. 3 of our friends, always the more adventurous ones, started talking about exploring the surrounding area. "The mountain at night must be amazing," one of them said, already reaching for their jacket. "We should check it out." The rest of us protested, arguing that it was too dark and dangerous. The forest that had seemed so inviting during the day now loomed ominously beyond our windows. But they were determined, insisting that nighttime exploration was the best part of being in such a remote location. None of us could have known then that this simple decision would split our experience into 2 parallel nightmares. As we watched them prepare to leave, checking their phone flashlights and pulling on warmer clothes, we had no idea that we would all soon face horrors beyond our comprehension, both those who stayed and those who ventured into the darkness. The argument about splitting up lasted longer than it should have. Those of us staying behind listed every horror movie cliché about why separating was a terrible idea. "It is pitch black out there," I reasoned, gesturing toward the windows that now reflected our indoor lights like black mirrors. "There are no street lights, and the terrain is unfamiliar." "That is exactly what makes it exciting," countered one of the 3 preparing to leave. They were already dressed in light jackets, phone flashlights tested and ready. "When else do we get the chance to experience true darkness? Besides, we will stick to the main path." The 4 of us staying behind exchanged concerned looks. We were the more cautious ones of the group, or perhaps just more tired from the day's activities. The thought of trudging through the mountain darkness held no appeal, especially with the comfortable warmth of the house surrounding us. "At least take some real flashlights," suggested one of us, remembering seeing some in the kitchen drawer earlier. But when we checked, the drawer was empty. Strange, considering how certain we were about spotting them earlier. "Our phones are fully charged," assured another of the leaving group, already heading toward the door. "And we will not go far. Just want to check out the night sky away from any light pollution." The remaining 4 of us settled back into the living room, arranging ourselves on the worn but comfortable couches. We had plenty of snacks left, and someone suggested watching whatever we could catch on the old TV. The separation felt strange. Our group had rarely split up during previous trips. I remember checking my phone one last time before they left, noting that it was just past 10 o'clock. The signal bar still showed full strength, which seemed reassuring at the time. "Text us if you need anything," I called out as they opened the front door. The night air that rushed in felt unusually cold for summer. One of our departing friends paused in the doorway, looking back at us with an expression I cannot quite forget, a mixture of excitement and something else, something that in retrospect might have been apprehension. "Do not get too scared without us," they joked, and then they were gone, their flashlight beams dancing through the windows before disappearing into the darkness. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house with a finality that made us all glance at each other. For a moment, no one spoke. The house felt different, somehow larger, emptier, despite still holding 4 of us. "They are crazy," muttered one friend, reaching for the TV remote. "I am too comfortable to move anyway." We all nodded in agreement, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over us. The TV only picked up 2 channels clearly, so we settled for an old movie playing through slight static. The familiar comfort of snacks and casual conversation helped ease the strange tension that had followed our friend's departure. We sprawled across the couches, passing around a bag of chips, making occasional comments about the movie's predictable plot. It was during a quiet moment in the film that one of us noticed it. "Hey, guys." The hesitation in my friend's voice made us all look up. That portrait, was the woman always smiling like that? I turned toward the hallway painting, and felt my stomach drop. The woman's expression had completely changed. The tears I had noticed earlier were gone, replaced by an unnaturally wide smile. Her eyes, previously filled with sorrow, now seemed to gleam with an unsettling mirth. "What do you mean?" another friend asked, moving closer to the portrait. "Was it different before?" "She was crying," I said, standing up to get a better look. I specifically remember because I thought it was such a depressing choice for a vacation house. "Are you sure?" Maybe it was just the lighting earlier. But I knew what I had seen. The woman's entire countenance had transformed from profound sadness to an almost manic joy. The change was so dramatic it seemed impossible that anyone could dismiss it as a trick of light. "Maybe we are just tired," suggested one friend, though their voice wavered slightly. "Or the beer is getting to us." We tried to return our attention to the movie, but I could feel everyone stealing glances at the portrait. The woman's smile seemed to grow more pronounced with each look, though I told myself it had to be my imagination. "This place is starting to feel weird," muttered one friend, pulling their legs up onto the couch. "I hope the others are okay out there." The words had barely left their mouth when it happened. Clank. The sound ripped through the quiet room like a gunshot, making us all jump. The harsh metallic screech of the lock mechanism turning was unmistakable, not the gentle click of a door naturally settling, but the deliberate, forceful sound of a deadbolt sliding into place. Clank. The sound still echoed in our ears as we sat frozen in place. For a moment, nobody moved, as if breaking the silence might trigger something worse. The television continued to play in the background, its soft static creating an eerie white noise that only heightened our tension. "What was that?" someone finally whispered, though we all knew exactly what we had heard. I was the first to stand, moving cautiously toward the front door. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath my feet, each step seeming louder than it should have been. When I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembled slightly. I turned it, but the door refused to budge. "It will not open," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. I jiggled the handle harder, then threw my shoulder against the wood. Nothing. The door remained firmly shut, as if it had been sealed into its frame. "They are messing with us," one friend said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow in the large room. "The others must have found another way in. They are trying to scare us." It was a reasonable explanation, exactly what we wanted to believe. Our friends had always enjoyed practical jokes, and this seemed like something they would do. I pulled out my phone to call them, to demand they stop this nonsense, but the call would not go through. "My signal is gone," I muttered, staring at my phone screen. "Can anyone else try?" The others checked their phones, but all of us had the same issue. No signal, no internet connection. Just a few minutes ago, we had full bars. How could it disappear so suddenly? We moved through the house, checking every window and door. Each one was locked tight, with no visible mechanism to explain how they had all secured themselves simultaneously. The back door, the kitchen windows, even the small bathroom window, all sealed. "Look for another way out," someone suggested, their voice higher than usual. "There has to be a key somewhere." We began searching systematically, pulling open drawers and cabinets, checking under furniture, and scanning walls for any hidden key hooks. The house seemed to watch our increasingly frantic movements, the portrait woman's smile growing impossibly wider with each passing minute. The temperature in the house had dropped noticeably. Our breath began to form small clouds in the air, despite the summer warmth we had enjoyed earlier. The old lamps flickered occasionally, casting dancing shadows on the walls that seemed to move independently of their sources. "Maybe we could break a window," one friend suggested hesitantly. "I mean, if we have to." "And risk having to pay for damages," another countered. "Besides, what if we are overreacting? They could come back any minute and laugh at us for breaking things." We gathered back in the living room, perching on the edges of the couches, no longer relaxed. The TV continued its quiet drone, though now the static seemed more pronounced, the images on screen slightly distorted. "Let us just wait," I suggested, trying to sound calm. "They will have to come back eventually. They left all their stuff here." As if to mock my attempted rationality, the television suddenly emitted a high-pitched squeal. The screen flickered violently, displaying a series of rapid images we could not quite make out before going completely black. In the new silence, we could hear something else, a sound that made my skin crawl. Footsteps. Not from outside, where they might have indicated our friend's return, but from upstairs. Slow, deliberate steps moving across the ceiling above us. We had all been downstairs for hours. There should not have been anyone up there. The footsteps moved closer to the stairs, each creak of the floorboards distinct and purposeful. We huddled closer together on the couch, eyes fixed on the darkened stairwell. The steps reached the top of the stairs, and then the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by our shallow breathing. No one dared to move. Then someone whispered, "Maybe it is just the house settling?" Before anyone could respond, a piercing scream shattered the quiet. One of my friends had leaped up from the couch, pointing at the large living room window. There was a face. Someone was watching us. We all spun around, but the window showed only darkness. "What did you see?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her face had gone pale. A face, hanging upside down. It was pressed against the glass, just staring at us. Smiling. Her voice cracked. It was not normal. The neck, it was twisted all wrong. "You are imagining things," another friend said, but they did not sound convinced. "There is a porch railing right there. No one could get that close to the window without climbing over it." We moved away from the windows anyway, clustering in the center of the room. The television remained dark, its screen a perfect black mirror reflecting our frightened faces. The temperature seemed to drop even further. "We need to check," I said finally. "If someone is really out there." We approached the window cautiously, our phone flashlights pointed outward. The beams cut through the darkness but revealed nothing except tree branches swaying in a wind we could not feel inside the house. "I know what I saw," our friend insisted, her voice trembling. "It was right there, just hanging, watching us. Its eyes." She stopped, wrapping her arms around herself. A sudden tapping sound made us all jump. It came from another window, then another, like something was moving around the house, testing each pane of glass. The sound grew louder, more insistent. "It has to be them," someone said desperately. "They are just trying to scare us. This is not funny anymore." I pulled out my phone again, determined to reach our friends. The signal bar flickered once, showing full strength for just a moment. I quickly dialed, and to my surprise, it started ringing. "It is connecting," I announced, putting the phone on speaker. The ringing echoed through the quiet room. After several rings, the automated voice message began, "The number you have dialed is not available. Please check the number and try again." Just as I was about to hang up, I thought I heard something else, a faint breathing sound beneath the automated message. "Wait," I said, lowering the phone from my ear. "Did you guys hear that?" "Hear what?" "I think I heard breathing." The others looked skeptical, but curious. I redialed the number, this time keeping it on speaker from the start. We all listened intently as the same automated message played. "See?" "Just the normal message," one of my friends started to say, but I held up my hand. There it was again, definitely breathing, barely audible beneath the recording. I dialed a third time, determined to listen to the entire message all the way through. The automated voice droned on as expected. As the message neared its end, we all leaned in closer, straining to hear. Then, in that same mechanical tone, but somehow distorted, it asked, "Why are not you hanging up?" The silence that followed that mechanical voice felt suffocating. One of my friends had started crying quietly, while another sat frozen, staring at nothing. The temperature seemed to drop even further, our breaths now clearly visible in the air. "This is not happening," someone whispered. "This cannot be real." I tried the phone again, but now there was not even a dial tone. The screen showed full signal, yet every call attempt failed immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "We need to get out of here," our most timid friend sobbed, her voice breaking. "Please, we need to get out right now." She had pulled her knees up to her chest, rocking slightly back and forth on the couch. "The windows," another suggested, their voice trembling. "Maybe we could break them." "I do not care about the damage anymore." But before we could move, the tapping started again, this time at every window simultaneously. It was no longer the tentative sound from before, but an aggressive, rhythmic beating that made the glass vibrate in its frames. "Stop it," our usually calmest friend suddenly screamed, jumping to his feet. His face had turned red with anger, fear transforming into rage. "This is not funny anymore. You are taking this way too far." He stormed toward the front door, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. "You think this is entertaining?" he shouted even louder, pounding his fist against the door. Scaring us like this? Making people cry? Real mature, guys. The rest of us watched in stunned silence as he continued his tirade, his voice growing hoarser with each word. Open this door right now. I have had enough of your stupid pranks. This is not Dash. Click. The sound cut through his words like a knife. The door lock disengaged with that same harsh metallic sound we had heard earlier, but in reverse. The sudden silence that followed was deafening. My angry friend stepped back from the door as if it had burned him. We all stared at the handle, nobody daring to move. The tapping at the windows had stopped. Even the air felt still. I thought. He started, his anger deflating into confusion. I thought they were right outside. They would have had to be right there to unlock it that quickly. But we had all seen the darkness through the windows. There had been no one on the porch, no flashlight beams, no movement at all outside. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he reached for the door handle. The metal gleamed dully in the lamplight, as if inviting his touch. When his fingers finally made contact, we all held our breath. The door swung open with an ominous creak, revealing the pitch-black night beyond. The porch was empty. No sign of our friends, no indication that anyone had been there at all. Just the endless darkness of the forest and the soft whisper of wind through leaves. But as we stared into that darkness, we all heard the sound of footsteps creaking across the porch boards. Invisible footsteps, moving toward the open door. The invisible footsteps on the porch stopped abruptly. We stood frozen, staring into the darkness, when a different sound caught our attention, distant but growing closer. Running footsteps, not the slow deliberate ones we had just heard, but frantic, desperate strides accompanied by labored breathing. 3 figures burst from the darkness, sprinting toward the house as if being chased. Even in the dim light, I could recognize our friends. They practically fell through the doorway, gasping for air, their clothes and hair damp with sweat despite the cold night. Close it, one of them wheezed between breaths. Close the door. We slammed it shut immediately. They collapsed onto the floor, chests heaving, faces pale and drawn. Their clothes were dirty, marked with soil and scratches as if they had been running through brush rather than following the paths. Water, one of them managed to say. Please. As I rushed to get water, I noticed their hands were trembling violently. These were the same friends who had left earlier full of excitement and bravado, now reduced to shaking wrecks on the floor. We need to get out of here, I said, still shaken from our own experiences. Something is wrong with this house. We should leave now, Dash. No. One of them shot up, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. We cannot go out there. You do not understand. Outside is worse. Much worse. What are you talking about? We have been seeing things in here, hearing things, Dash. At least we can see the threats in here, another cut in, voice still trembling. Out there, you do not know what is waiting. Are you serious? We just saw a face in the window, upside down. The portrait changed, there were footsteps upstairs, Dash. Listen to me. The third one finally spoke, almost hysterical. We cannot leave. Not now. Not in the dark. You have no idea what is out there. No idea what we just Dash. A sudden silence fell over the room. The kind of silence that feels alive, watching, waiting. We all felt it, a shift in the air, a change in pressure. And in that moment, looking at each other's terrified faces, we understood. It was not just the house. It was not just the forest. It was this place. This entire location. Something was wrong with all of it. The realization hit us all at once. We needed to get away from here, not just the house or the forest, but this entire area. Without another word, we grabbed only our essential belongings, not even bothering with the rest of our stuff. No one suggested calling for help. After what we had experienced with the phone, none of us wanted to risk hearing that mechanical voice again. Besides, our phones still showed no signal, despite the full bars displayed on the screen. We moved as a group toward the front door, our flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The portrait watched us leave, its smile now seeming more like a sneer. None of us looked back at it. The night air hit us like a physical force as we stepped outside. The darkness seemed thicker than natural, our flashlights barely penetrating a few feet ahead. We stayed close together, following the gravel path that led down the mountain. The sound of our footsteps on the gravel seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet night. No crickets chirped, no wind rustled the leaves, just the crunch of our feet and our rapid breathing. "Keep moving," someone whispered. "Do not stop, no matter what you hear." We had only gone about 50 yards when one of the house lights flickered behind us. Despite our terror, we all turned to look. The house stood silhouetted against the night sky, and for a moment, it looked different, older, decayed, as if we were seeing its true form. Then all the lights in the house came on at once, blazing with an intensity that made us shield our eyes. Through the windows, we could see shadows moving, not the regular shadows cast by furniture or fixtures, but tall, distorted shapes that should not have been there. Just as quickly, the lights went out, plunging everything back into darkness. But in that brief illumination, we had seen something else. The house itself had changed. What had appeared well-maintained just hours ago now looked abandoned, with broken windows and crumbling walls. We ran. All 7 of us, no longer caring about staying quiet or dignified. We ran down that mountain path as fast as we dared in the darkness, our flashlight beams bouncing wildly. Behind us, we could hear multiple somethings moving through the forest on either side of the path. The gravel path seemed longer than it had during our arrival. Much longer. We kept running, our lungs burning, until finally we saw the first sign of civilization, a single streetlight marking the beginning of the main road. As we reached that light, the sounds from the forest stopped. We turned to look back one final time. The house was no longer visible through the trees, but we could all swear we heard it, a mechanical voice, carried on the wind, asking, "Why are you leaving?" We found another lodging house near the base of the mountain. The owner's reaction when we mentioned where we had come from still haunts me. That old house. Up in the deep mountain? The owner's face had gone pale. That place has been abandoned for at least a decade. No one goes up there anymore. It is all blocked off, there are warning signs everywhere. We tried to explain that we had just been there, had booked it online, had transferred money to reserve it. The owner just shook his head slowly. "That is impossible. The place has been empty since the incident. The authorities closed it off after what happened. You kids must have gone to the wrong place." But we knew we had not. We showed him our booking confirmation, the listing we had found online. To our horror, when we pulled up the website, the listing had vanished. The money we had transferred, the account no longer existed. "Listen," the owner said, his voice serious. "You should not have been up there. That place, there is a reason it was closed off. Just be grateful you all made it down." We spent the rest of the night huddled in the common room of the new lodge, too terrified to sleep. That is when the three who had gone walking finally told us what had happened to them. The rest of us shared our experience in the house too. Both stories made our blood run cold. But the real horror came the next morning. When we checked our phones, looking at the photos and messages we thought we had sent earlier that day. The three who had gone walking started their story. Their hands still shook as they spoke. At first, it was just like any night hike. We were joking around, using our phone flashlights to find our way. The path seemed clear enough, one began, his voice unsteady. Then we met him. An old man, just walking in the pitch darkness without any light. We thought it was strange, but figured he must live around here, maybe knew the mountain paths well enough to walk them blind. He was friendly, another continued, swallowing hard. Started telling us about the area, about the mountain. He walked with us, talking the whole time. But something felt off. The way he moved, it was not quite right. We did not notice at first, but he kept leading us away from the main path. Every time we tried to turn back, he would point out something interesting ahead. Before we knew it, we were on paths we had never seen before. I started getting nervous when I realized we could not see the lights from the house anymore. When I mentioned turning back, he just smiled and said we were almost there. Almost where? We had not planned to go anywhere specific. Then one of us asked him how he could see so well without a flashlight. That is when the third one stopped, shuddering at the memory. He just stopped walking. Everything went quiet. Then he turned to us and said, "You noticed?" His voice, it was not the same voice anymore. And his face. We ran. We just ran. But the paths kept changing. Every time we thought we found the way back, it would lead to somewhere else. Sometimes to the edge of cliffs we knew should not have been there. It was like the mountain itself was trying to trap us. The worst part was hearing him behind us. Not running, just walking. Calmly calling out to us. Asking why we were leaving, saying he had so much more to show us. But his voice kept changing, becoming less and less human. We finally saw the house lights and just sprinted straight through the forest. I do not even know how we found our way back. But we knew something was following us the whole time. They fell silent, their story told. We sat in the new lodge's common room, the early morning light starting to creep through the windows. None of us had slept. "We should check those photos we took earlier," someone suggested quietly. "The ones we posted." With trembling hands, we pulled out our phones. The signal was strong here, unlike in the mountain house. We navigated to our social media accounts, dreading what we might find. The first shock came when we realized all our posts were set to private. We never did that. Every photo, every status update from yesterday, all hidden from public view. Maybe we accidentally changed the settings, someone suggested weakly. But we all knew better. We opened the first photo, the one of us at the barbecue. What should have been a cheerful image of friends around a grill turned our blood to ice. The grill was there, but instead of meat and vegetables, it was piled with what looked like branches and stones. And our faces, we were all there, but every single one of us wore the same blank, emotionless expression. "This cannot be right," I muttered, my voice shaking. "This is not what we took." We swiped to the next image, a photo of the house. In our memory, it had been a well-maintained, inviting structure. The image on the screen showed a dilapidated building, windows broken, paint peeling. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. With growing horror, we went through photo after photo. Each one was wrong, distorted in ways that defied explanation. Group selfies showed us with unnaturally wide smiles and eyes that seemed to glow. Shots of the interior revealed rooms that were dusty and decayed, not the clean spaces we remembered. Then we checked our text messages. The conversations with our partners and families were there, but the content, it was all wrong. Where we remembered sending cheerful updates about our trip, the actual messages were disjointed, filled with strange symbols and phrases that made no sense. One message to my girlfriend read, "The trees are singing. Do you hear them too? They say we should stay forever." Another friend's text to his parents simply repeated, "The portrait watches. The portrait knows," over and over. We looked at each other, faces pale with shock and fear. How had we not noticed this before? How had we sent these messages and taken these photos without realizing? "Check the call logs," someone whispered. We did. And there it was, multiple calls to numbers we did not recognize, all made during the time we were in that house. Numbers that, when we tried to call them back now, were met with the same automated message: "The number you have dialed is not in service." As the reality of what had happened, what could have happened, sank in, we sat in stunned silence. The morning sun was fully up now, shining through the windows of the lodge, but it brought no comfort. We had escaped, yes. But we had brought something back with us. Evidence of an experience that defied explanation, that challenged our very understanding of reality. And somewhere up in those mountains, in a house that should not exist, something was waiting. Watching. Perhaps even now, reaching out through our phones, our photos, our messages. The next morning, we had to go back. Not because we wanted to, God, no, but because we had left most of our belongings there. The lodge owner insisted on driving us, refusing to let us go alone after hearing our story. As we approached the turnoff to the house, we all tensed. The gravel path we had driven up yesterday was blocked by a rusted chain and multiple warning signs. They looked old, weathered by years of exposure. "See," the owner said, pointing at the signs. "This road has been closed for years." But we had driven up this path just yesterday. We had parked our cars right in front of that house. We had cooked, eaten, laughed. We followed the owner as he led us around the barrier on foot. The path looked different in daylight, overgrown, clearly unused for years. After about 15 minutes of walking, we saw it. The house stood exactly where we remembered, but it was not the house we had stayed in. This was a shell, a ruin. The windows were broken or boarded up, the porch had partially collapsed, and the walls were covered in graffiti and weather damage. "This is impossible," one of my friends whispered. "This cannot be the same place." But it was. We could see our cars parked in front, exactly where we had left them. They looked oddly out of place against the decrepit building, like modern artifacts in an ancient ruin. The owner stayed back as we approached the house. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, dust covered everything. Spider webs stretched across corners, and small animals had clearly made homes in the debris. Our belongings sat exactly where we had left them, bags packed and ready by the door, looking surreally clean and new against the decades of decay surrounding them. As we quickly gathered our things, trying not to look too closely at our surroundings, I caught a glimpse of the hallway. The portrait still hung there, but now it was just a blank canvas, rotted with age and moisture. We grabbed everything as fast as we could and practically ran back to the owner's car. No one spoke during the drive down. What could we say? How could we explain what we had experienced? That was 6 months ago. We have tried to move on, to rationalize what happened. But some things cannot be explained away. The money we transferred for the booking bank records show it never existed. The website where we found the listing has no record of the house. Even our booking confirmation emails have vanished, as if they were never sent. The photos and messages remain on our phones, unchangeable proof of what we experienced. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself scrolling through them, trying to understand. The blank faces, the decaying rooms, the nonsensical texts, they seem to mock our memories of what we thought we were doing. We have researched the house since then. The owner was right, it had been abandoned for years after some incident that locals refused to discuss. The few records we found mention only that it was closed for public safety following unexplained events. But here's what truly keeps me awake at night. Last week, one of us was going through their phone and found a new photo in their gallery. It was dated from that night, but none of us remember taking it. The image shows all 7 of us, sitting in that living room, smiling those unnatural smiles. Behind us, visible in the mirror, stands a figure. An old man, watching us with an expression that is not quite human. And in the corner of the photo, there is a notification showing one unread message. When we zoom in, we can just make out the text. Why did you leave? We are still waiting.